Well, there it is, fresh out of the mold, ready for trimming. Notice it has a pretty dull finish on it, and when you rubbed it with your hands, it had all kinds of rough texture to it in spots because of the porosity of the mold surface. But it sanded right off. I went straight to 1000 grit, so it wasn't hard to sand off. Paint cleaned up nice. Here's a close-up picture of a spot that I burned through when I was cleaning up the flange. I burned through the paint. You can't see it in the finished part, but that's what it looks like. And here's another one up by the nose. So as I'm cutting this with this cutoff wheel right here, I'm going to stop the cut. I'm going to put a relief cut up by the nose. If I continue cutting that strip, once it gets to right at the tip of the nose, there's a good chance it could tear, and it'll end up tearing sideways and most likely into the part, and it can tear up into the actual paint on the part. So I'm giving it a relief cut there, and then I'll go back where I left off and continue the cut. And when I get it close, I don't want the weight of that piece that I'm trimming off hanging down. So that's why I put the vacuum off to the side and grabbed hold of it to finish that cut. So I'm basically just going around the airplane, doing the leading edge first here, but I'm just hanging it off the edge of the table and weighing it down with weight bags on the other side so it doesn't move around much on me. So here's another spot that I'm doing a relief cut. Now I'm just going off of the edge because that piece is starting to get heavy. And if I let it get heavy and I'm not supporting it because I have my hands full, right? I have one on the Dremel and one on the vacuum. The weight of that piece can all of a sudden it'll just start tearing the laminate. So I cut them in small pieces and I cut them away so they're not hanging down. This is 80 thousandths forward of this hard line here in the tool. And I'm only marking this every few feet, couple feet. So as I'm scribing down, I can kind of see that I'm hitting these marks, so I'm maintaining that width. And that one looks to be about 90 or 100 thou, I'd say. That was a joke. This one looks closer to 80. Let's see what it does. I think that's pretty much right there. Hit a little chingus there, but that works. All right. I'll take that all day. Sweet. Little, looks maybe a little light there. Let's see. It's pretty close. So now I'll trim on the out. I'll split that line basically with the cutter, and then I'll sand up to the edge of that for my trailing edge. That's not sharp. So here's a spot. See that little crack there? Not the black one on the left, but the little micro one right there. That is a tear in the laminate. Remember, this is only paint and a very fine glass veil. And the reason I have that is because earlier when I was trimming the trailing edge, I weighted down, I put some weights over that, and I think I put some tape over it, like I was trying to hold it down really good, and it cracked that. And so as I was looking at it, I was starting to file this down, I saw that. So I have to be super careful with that. Otherwise, it'll run right into the part and it won't come out. Now that I have everything trimmed and it's like within 1/8 of an inch, I'll use a sander. But before that, I have to like finesse that little corner out where that crack was. So that's what I'm working on right here. Because if I bend that at all, it'll tear it up. So basically, I take this DA sander and I sand everything real close. I can get like a 1/16 of an inch or less close to every line or every edge that I need to with that sander. And then from there, I'll use a file. I use a fine, like a 0 grind file on all the straights. And on this particular plane, I had to use, and then you can see I'm doing a final sand to the trailing edge with that permagrit block, that long block. And then I'll use a file on everything else. And on this particular plane, since there's an inside radius up by the nose, I had to use a half round file. And you can see here there's still some Sharpie mark there on the trailing edge. So that's what I'm doing with that big block, is just sanding to that. But I'm going down it, making sure that it's equal reveal, right? I want, I don't want a bunch of Sharpie on one end and less on the other, then it's crooked. So I know that I marked it nice and parallel with that step that's in the tool. So that's what this is kind of showing, is that as I'm sanding, I just stop. I'll sand for like 10 or 15 seconds and I'll stop and I'll double check to make sure I'm not putting extra pressure on one area. And if it's thicker, like that looks maybe a little bit thick, I'll try to clean that up and get it all equal before I continue on. And here's that file work. That's just a leading edge thing. I file down to the parting line, like as close as I can get. It's almost to net zero. And then I take like a flat block with like 320 on it or 400, and I'll block it to get the last little bit off. Once I had everything sanded and cleaned up, I wanted to get it on the scale, see what it weighed, and then I marked out the CG and all the locations for all the gear and taped it all on so I could see what the all-up weight will be when it's ready to fly. And it ends up being 79 or 80 ounces all-up weight, which is pretty light for the amount of wing area it has. Should be pretty good. That being said, I had to add 2.5 ounces per wingtip, which is flat sheet lead just outside of the aileron servos. So here I'm masking off the leading edge and trailing edge, and I'm sanding. I sanded dry with 1000 grit with the DA, and I'm taping. I have the trailing edge and the parting line and the leading edge taped off so it don't burn through, because they're sensitive areas. And then after that, I took it outside and I used the DA still, but I used water, and I went 1500 and then all the way up to 3000 because I didn't have any 2500 paper. So I wet sanded it with 15 with the DA and then 3000. And then I brought it back in and used a polisher. I have a polisher that does not generate heat, and it's really good for the planes. If you use like a buffer, it tends to like create too much heat and from all the friction, and it ends up like blistering paint and things like that. So this thing's actually pretty good. It's actually like a DA sander is kind of how it works, and it has variable speed. And so I threw some polish on it, and this is not, I could have spent hours trying to get this paint real nice. I'm not that good at this. I have a friend that's really good at it, but I just, put a little bit of a shine on it. It could have used a lot more work. It still can, but it's decent. And I like to get a good coat of wax on it, so when I start processing the wing, nothing sticks to it in case I, drop some CA or drop something on it, epoxy or whatever. It can like maybe be removed. Well, all said and done, everything turned out pretty nice. Here's a picture of the parting line at the wingtip. It's very clean, nice and tight, crisp. All of the leading edge is super clean. There's no weird bumps or anything funky about it, meaning that I didn't over sand that hard edge in the mold. So can't complain. And next thing to do is to cut out all the control surfaces and the hatches, and do some wipers and get it ready to go.